Well, that was sincere. I'll give you 3 questions tomorrow. And so you'll come into class on Wednesday and you will write. Now, I will go over an outline again tomorrow. I've showed you once before, but talk a little bit about outline. I need an outline. I'm going to collect your outline. You have to be organized. And the outline is just a few words. You know, if you're going to talk about the factors of the Industrial Revolution and you say the transportation revolution, you just put down like transportation. And then you put down your facts you need, like railroad, canal, cost drop. That's all. You don't write your essay in the outline. Just very quick so you don't forget main facts. And I'll talk about it again. But when you come into class on Wednesday, you need paper. I will let you, and I know this is almost too much. You can use line paper. You can bring in line paper. Yeah, I know. Control yourself. I know I'm giving too much. And one more thing. You can have your outline. You can come in with the outline. Now, it's got to just have a couple words on each point. 1 or 2 words, but I'll let you have that because I want a good essay. I want everyone to write and be confident in what they're doing. And so that's what you can have. Now, if I see more than a couple words, I take your outline and I shred it.
As long as you know Chris will.
Yes. Yeah, 3 pots, we got to answer for them. Pick one. I'll give you 3 possible. They're all about the Roman Empire. Right? We talked about this. So 1 on Claudius, 1 on the death of Caesar and Augustus, and then of course Caligula. Caligula made his horse a member of the Senate. Okay, moving on. He also had his soldiers attack the English Channel. Huh? Maximus? Put your head down. Everyone knows that. Maximus is going to be very brutally beheaded. Very brutally. Let me tell you about the beheading machine the Romans had. Moving on. Did we get to this? Oh, what is it named for going back to nature? The idea is to get away from this empirical, money-grubbing world of science and go back to nature on a long hike. And what do they call it in Europe? Romantic. And what was their view towards the past? The romantic view towards the past. Yeah. Not the way things actually were, but yeah, they should have been. Wouldn't have been so great. And that's nostalgia. And this, in essence, is that liberal or conservative? That's more of a conservative idea. And there's something about being kind of more liberal and conservative. People have elements of both. It's not like a team where you're only one member. I can be very nostalgic and also rights and moving and improving things. I think all of us can. So, did we get this? And we got transcendentals and transcendentalism, and yes. Oh, let's get to Protestant work ethic. Hey, Protestant work ethic. Did we finish it or just get to here?
Just got the hard work.
Okay, so the Protestant work ethic, you notice a very important word, Protestant. This is excluding a lot of people. And the idea of hard work, go to heaven. Hard work in here is also, hard work though can be difficult. You work harder and the profit goes someplace else. Remember, that was one of the big elements of capitalism. The capitalist takes all the risk, but they get the profit. There's a payoff, and that's an issue. I hate that. Next one is punctuality and then temperance. Punctuality, be where you're supposed to be on time. Now, in our modern world, since the Industrial Revolution, yeah, if you're going to say you're going to be someplace, you be there. But remember, before the Industrial Revolution, you had to convince people, coerce them to do them. And of course, temperance, cutting back on alcohol. I would say all 3 of these are very noble, especially in our modern world, noble values. But it could also be manipulated. I should add, this is a scene from the great silent movie, German silent movie called Metropolis. And it's about this dystopian world where most of the workers are just are working in horrific jobs as drones. Here they are lined up, checking at the time clock. Here's a shift going in, here's the shift going out. And in the movie, it's just kind of vague work. And then a tiny little group of incredibly wealthy lead a life of luxury, kind of above them, like in the clouds. It's from the 1920s. It's a good movie, but like, watch silent movies, it'd be kind of hard. Have you ever seen that? It's really good.
What is that called?
The 20s? Yeah, from the 1920s. This one will be a little bit less, but yeah, there's a lot of things that are kind of neat. Yes,
What is it called again?
Metropolis. It's really good. Also, the best horror movie of that era is a German movie called Nosferatu. About Dracula. This is scary. So, here's the thing though. A lot of workers did not like this. This implies, hey, we don't work before. Who do we work for? They resisted this, especially those who were Catholic. Because underlying it, it's implying that Catholics don't work hard, Catholics aren't on time, and the biggie, Catholics are drunkards. Now, this is, of course, something that Protestants would push, and this really has a lot to do with English Protestants brutally conquering Ireland and trying to justify it by saying the Irish don't work hard, they're subhuman. Which is a huge prejudice against Ireland. And what the English did to Ireland is one of the great crimes against humanity. And so, it really fits in there. The workers did not like this. They're saying, we worked hard, don't try to manipulate it so your profit goes up. I'm not going to be, a lot of workers, and you're not going to try to say I'm not going to be more temperate, punctual, or hard work. So you have profit, and you imply I'll go to heaven when I know better than that. You're tricky. So that is kind of the end of the religious part of the effects of this, because we got to get urbanization. Cities grew rapidly in this time. This is 1820. 1820, so this is the next effect, urbanized. You can see a few cities. New York City was the largest at about 200,000. New York City then was just basically Manhattan. And soon there'll be two separate cities called the Bronx, which is in north of Manhattan, and Brooklyn, which is on Long Island. And they're actually, at that time, separate cities. Yeah, they have San Francisco, which is a tiny Spanish town, because it's a very good harbor. And it could have been like Santa Fe was a tiny little town. You know, Chicago was nothing more than a dock on Lake Michigan. Look at by 1860. And this is going to lead to a massive overcrowding. Cities just exploded, and you'll notice most are in the north. So New York is almost 1 million people, and Brooklyn is almost 500,000. 1880s, those three will unify together into one massive New York City. But they still routinely call Brooklyn New York City, which infuriated people from Brooklyn. But it's kind of weird, you know, Brooklyn still has their own district attorney. It's just a weird kind of combination. But Philadelphia was huge, but once again in the north. And Chicago's growing, and places like Rochester, Buffalo, Troy, Pittsburgh, these are industrial towns. And you'll also notice nothing in the south. There was almost no planning for these towns. And what's going to happen to rent if people are going to have to move to towns and find a place to live? And there's no place to live. Rents skyrocketed. We are going through something very familiar today. There's a massive shortage of homes and rentals. There's real estate, but it's kind of scooped up by a tiny percentage today. And this will lead to all kinds of problems down the road. No city services, no plans for schools, crazy things like sewage, fire, law and order. All of these things were not made out. Should add one more thing. It's not just immigrants. There's a lot of migrants from the farms. Remember, with now mechanization, families either lose their farm or have to send the kids to the city. It's a radically shifting world. And we saw this in element in your lifetime, really saw it in my lifetime, in the 1970s and 80s. The small towns, even in Montana, just are disappearing. You know, the town I grew up in Miles City when I was a kid. It was about 12,000 people. My high school was about just under 600. And now it's about 8,000. And all these little towns were just shrinking. Townsend is about 2/3 what it used to be. Same deal, going to the city. So we used to have that same element. So we're going to jump right to this. Next big effect, occupation changed dramatically. With more commerce and more urban, you can see the shift. Look at 1820. Now these are generic. You notice there's a lot of other. And others are generally more commercial or education. But 1830, almost 80% of the population made their sole income from farming. It's slightly over half in 1860, but the majority of people in the north were not making their income from the city. That means they are more urban, taking everything from construction, look, from nothing to more construction. And that's going to become a major employer. Manufacturing, trade and transport are very similar to each other, and the service industry, like the big one would be like restaurants or hotels, growing bigger and bigger and bigger. It's a radically changing world and how people's expectations of how to make a living. And it's a big difference. Relative self-sufficient, must earn a wage. By the way, does anyone know what percentage of the American population makes their sole income from agriculture today?
3%?
How much?
3?
You're too high.
1.
About 0.5. Is that what you said? What did you say? Oh yeah, yeah. What is it in Montana? Maybe slightly over 1%. Now there's people out farm, but very few people make their sole living from farming. Almost none. And so I know I have a lot of good friends who have farms, who live on a farm, and one person maybe runs a farm, and the other, works in the city. It's just very few people anymore. It's a totally different world, and mostly in the north. Also, new immigration. When the United States was first became a country, most of the immigrants were from England, Scotland, or Wales. So Great Britain. But 1830s and 1840s, I didn't put the date, but 1830s and 1840s, a new wave of immigration. And there'll be another new wave in the 1880s, 1890s. And a significant number, as you can see from this, still a lot from Britain, but Ireland and what is now Germany. There was no Germany yet. And you can really see the rise in immigration in 1840. This is kind of shocking. And the significant number of those, this rise, were Southern Germans, what is now Southern Germany, and Ireland. And Ireland was a colony of England, of Great Britain. And there's a few reasons why. One is industrialization. As industry hit, farmers kicked off of their land. There was a surplus of workers, wages were low, workers being replaced by machines. They're terrified to go to the United States. A lot of skilled craftsmen from Germany left to avoid the factories and moved to the United States. And for a short time, they did okay. A lot of them began to collapse. A lot of German immigrants, German-speaking immigrants, would move to this part of Pennsylvania. After the World War, or after the Civil War, a lot of them. I think North Dakota is named after a German. North Dakota's capital is named after a German chancellor. And they moved down there in Pennsylvania, and what did they call? What did many people who are already in the United States call these German immigrants? Anyone know? That's more World War I. But good guess. That's a really good guess. After the language. They call them a bunch of Dutchmen. Did someone say that? Deutsch, yeah. It's Deutsch, Dutch. And so this area of Pennsylvania is kind of a touristy area. There's a lot of these German places. They make like German-looking buildings and restaurants. So it's called Pennsylvania Dutch country. People go there expecting to go to Amsterdam now, I guess. But no, it's Germans. All right, so what's the other reason? There was a worldwide famine. Worldwide. Don't celebrate famines here. But good for getting it right.
That's why my family's here.
There's actually a lot. This is worldwide. What crop failed? Potatoes. And the bad part about this potato blight is, well, first off, as we mentioned before talking about potatoes, potatoes are all clones. 99% of all potato production is a clone of a previous potato. And therefore, they're genetically weak. How do you grow potatoes? Yeah, you wait till they grow eyes. You can look wherever the potato like begins to sprout. You cut off that part that's sprouting, drop it in, grows a potato. But it's a clone, so they're genetically weak. Potatoes are a lot better when they're from seed, but that's really cheap to grow potatoes by just cutting them off. But the problem is, since they're weak, they to this day they're susceptible to this blight. They can't fight off this fungus. But the bad part is, they grow the potato, it sprouts up this nice green weed that looks perfectly healthy, and you have no idea until you dig it out. And it's slime. Really just a slime black, and it stinks. You have no idea until you pull it out. And that was worldwide. So this is going to trigger all sorts of problems everywhere. But it's going to hit the Irish worse because of the English. English colonizers had taken all the good land. And they grew wheat, a lot of wheat. But they shipped all of that wheat back to Britain. And then once the famine began in potatoes, more of that wheat went to Britain. And what did the Irish people have?
Potato.
They had potatoes. You grow a potato anyway. But when the potatoes begin to crash, the Irish, well, their population halved. Either they left or they died. Starvation. It must have been a hell that we can't comprehend because of the terror combined with the fact that the English would shoot anybody who tried to take the wheat that was grown in Ireland. There's a lot of reason why the Irish do not like the English. But that's a biggie. That's a biggie. And yeah, go to Ireland, and yeah, that's still very bitter for good reason. So they had no choice but to go. Some migrated to England. They kind of escaped in, and like Liverpool and places like that. But millions went to the United States, and that's why so many people in the United States have Irish immigrants, or Irish relatives as this Irish immigration, and that's when part of your family came. I have none on my side. Like all Americans are kind of a hodgepodge. Mine are Germans. Some came in this with the German wave. The Partridges came in the 17th century to Massachusetts, but they're English, so I tell people I'm Welsh. Moving on, and that would be here. And lastly, this is going to trigger revolutions all over. 1848 will be the year of revolution. Ireland would try to become independent, which, by the way, that would have a direct effect on Montana. Direct effect. But the revolutions, most of the revolutions for more rights failed. But like, for example, this famine would trigger a revolution in China actually in the 1850s that would kill over 2 million people, called the Taiping Rebellion. And that would help trigger Chinese immigrants to the United States in the 1860s and 1870s. So the point is, this is massive, worldwide. When people are hungry, they revolt. Did you drop something, or you want to steal my? You can take it. Well, out of this is immediately going to form a group of anti-immigrants, and this is relatively new because the United States was formed different than most of these other countries, would be nativists, nativism. And nativists were very much opposed, I didn't write this one, opposed to immigration, fearful of immigration. And what their point of view was, they looked at these people now from Ireland and Germany with their strange words and lingo and culture and food and diet and drink habits and religion, and said they're not real Americans. And so here is, which, by the way, not real Americans, when did citizens of the United States start referring to themselves as Americans? Yeah, just right before this, after the War of 1812 in Tippecanoe. So that they just started calling themselves, we're Americans, brand new. And by the way, where did most of the people who now call themselves Americans, where did they come from? So this is a thing, like, I got here, I got what I want, not for you or anybody else. And one more thing, here's a sign. I have no idea why the ends are backwards, but it says Native Americans, beware of foreign. It's hard with the ends backwards, influence. I guess that was artistic license, but the fear of them. And one of the things they really hammered was they're going to come take your jobs. You're going to urban areas, people now rely upon wage work. And all of a sudden, here are competitors for these jobs. And remember, what decides wages?
Supply and demand.
Supply and demand, competition in the market. You increase the supply of workers, especially workers who have to by choice. They have no choice. Take any job they can get. What would that do to wages? In the short run. That drops them. In the short run. In the long run, immigrants increase the market. They make the, when they make it, wages go up. But the other one was just outright prejudice. And prejudice against immigrants coming in with this different language and culture, but the biggie is they're Catholics. And if they're Catholics, they're going to come in, they're not really loyal to the United States. Who are Catholics loyal to, as we all know? The Pope. And whatever the Pope says, Catholics do in lockstep, right? Anyone here is a Catholic knows that. The Pope makes a pronouncement, and you're all like, yes, you're right. By the way, am I telling the truth?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's implying that they can never be real Americans because they're Catholic. And you see this today with other religious groups or other ethnic groups. So this was not like an isolated incident. It goes to this very day. And but because they're Catholics, that I told you about that with the Protestant work ethic, they work too hard, they're drunkards. Here, this horrible prejudice that Irish are drunk drinking whiskey and the Germans are drunk drinking lager beer, and what ties them together is their Catholicism. And you also notice, what do they carry? Ballot box. They're going to come in here and be used to steal elections from real Americans. And people say that today, all the time. And also it implies that they're a bunch of thugs. Notice the fight behind. Or because they're Catholic, they don't work hard, so they're poor, and now they're going to ship all the poor Galways to town in Ireland. This is incredibly classist and prejudiced. And it'll be against Irish, who, as we know, aren't real humans, would be the crime. Soon they'll say Irish would be a different race, which is just mind-boggling. But don't forget, races are constructed by humans. We made this kind of thing up. And I guess what fits. They'd have, so here's an example of Irish, basically implying that they're like a king. This horrible caricature would be used over and over again to show an Irish. You notice it's a kind of humanoid, but you also notice it's almost like an ape, implying they're not really human. That crown, that's Catholic. The same artist who did that cartoon was the one who gave us Santa Claus. Oh. And here's another one, defending our shores from all of these immigrants. And look how they draw the immigrants. More importantly, do you recognize this alligator, implying they're animals ready to chew us up? You see it? That's what the pontiff wears. It's showing like hat and the robe of the Pope. That kind of casual prejudice would become the norm, a very anti-Catholic bias. They're not really loyal to the United States. Here's another cartoon from Puck magazine, and it's showing an immigrant being stopped from coming in, and we don't want you in. And what are the shadows behind? What were they at one time? Immigrants or their relatives, immigrants too. They even formed their own political party. In the 1850s, it looked like this might become the second party. They had competition with this party called the Republicans. And they called themselves the American Party, but everybody called them the Know-Nothing Party, including themselves. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking, for good reason, who wants a political party called Know-Nothings? A secret nativist group, which went around basically just roughing up and intimidating immigrants, called themselves the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner. And since it was a secret, illegal organization, because they were committing crimes, you had to have a password. And all these kind of things to prove, all these little handshakes and everything, to prove you're a member. And if anybody asks a member of this group that's called the Order of the Star Spangled Banner, you must respond. If someone asks you, you don't know them, you respond with, I know nothing. That's where the party name came from. And then they grabbed hold. But the thing what this did is, it divided workers. It divided, I put divides because it divides to this day. Instead of workers say, hey, we're all wage work earners working together, we should fight for better lives together, it's, no, I don't want to talk to them because they're Catholic, or because they're a different color, or because they speak German or have an accent. And then they fight amongst themselves. And some people still get, and then wages still stay low, or whatever it might be. And is this a conservative or liberal idea? Nativism. It's pretty conservative. No, I should add, it doesn't mean that everybody who's conservative is a nativist. It's more complex than that because we have elements of both, as I said before. Yeah, this is more conservative to this day. But once again, these words are misused all the time, and most people have elements of both. There's not like a team. We are complex human beings. So this is really a big class conflict that's going to come out of this. And the thing about it is that the question about the classes is no longer this tiny little group of aristocrats who have all the land. It's now, who's going to benefit from this new system? Is it those who have the capital? This is another one as a joust between labor and the capitalists, or they call monopoly. And I love this with the knight with all its armor, and it's a steam engine. I think that's really clever. And here is a worker on a beat up old house, horse, poverty. All they have is their labor. That's a house, horse, a hammer. And for reasons that are hard to explain, whenever they drew workers, they drew them in a paper hat. And the hat was like this square hat to protect their hair from like fire and things getting on it. But you know, doesn't paper catch fire? Nah, nothing to worry. But whenever you see someone with that paper hat, and this goes well into the 20th century, that means worker. And who's going to win this battle? And by the way, you'll notice the audience, and here's the very wealthy with the best seats. And so there's going to be two views that are going to come out of this about who benefits. This is really important because it exists to this day, just in different ways. Who benefits? Who feels left out? Like the system is rigged against them, and they're never going to have a chance. And they're going to see them spiraling into poverty and getting worse. And I use this picture because during the Panic of 1893, it was so horrific with mass unemployment in New York City that desperate people were renting out alley space to live in. This is a picture of it. And we kind of have stuff like that happening today. Not quite that extreme, but close. Or is it opportunity? And here's New York City also, with all the new bustling city and the commerce and the nice clean roads and wagons delivering things and carriages. Prosperity is coming. Which is it? Are you left out, or is opportunity? And this will be so much of the divide and the fight. So those who felt left out, those who felt like the system is rigged, who, yes, they could get a wage, technically they're free. If you're not back in 5 minutes. Like, that's the rule. Is it a 5-minute rule or 4? And I'll just start sending people out randomly if I like their stuff. I mean to help them. Okay, so pointing to the camera. So people who felt like they're trapped in this system, they're never going to get ahead, and it's going to get continually worse. They're not free workers. They're not wage earners. They call it wage slavery. And these are the people who feel left out. They feel like the system is never going to work for them. They're trapped. They're in debt. If they hate their job, they can't leave or they starve. Their family starves. And if they're trapped in a place that there's no jobs, where are you going to go? Because you can't afford it. And so they feared capitalism. They feared that they were becoming slaves. Now, wage slaves are not the same as slavery on a plantation, chattel slavery, the slave codes, and the fornication laws. It's not the same thing. These are people who are technically free, but to their point of view, they're trapped as wage slaves. And the system is rigged for the wealthy. I didn't put that in there because I didn't want to. It's rigged. They control the political system, they control the laws, they get huge benefits from the government and then turn around and do whatever they want in competition. And remember the era of good feelings, there was one political party, the Republicans. But it held everybody. They would begin to break off to a new party. Which party would those who feared wage slavery join? The brand new Democratic Party. And they looked to Andrew Jackson. And so this is the roots of the Democratic Party. And the roots to this day, it has been, of course, inconsistent in this, of course, but it was always these people who felt like they're being left out of the system. And we will try to help them. That's part of the reason why the Democratic Party could have this weird kind of combination of trying to help workers and at the same time, it would be like white workers in the North, but also be pro-slavery. It's a weird contradiction. But they want to reform. They want to reform capitalism. Basically, they accept it. It's here. Regulate, control monopolies. But they're also more pro-union. Jackson was all over the place on this because it was so brand new. You're going to see very inconsistent on Jackson. But this is a great cartoon. Now, this is actually from right after the Civil War, but it's what fooled these wage slaves be. This is modern man. And here they are on a treadmill. So this is right after the Civil War. And no matter how hard they run, it stays the same. They're not moving. And be obedient. And it talks about all the things you might get and money at the end, but it's just a trick. You're a slave. You're caught in this. That's a very clever cartoon. And there's who's holding the capitalists, those who have the capital. But then what about the other people? What about this who say, no, you're not a slave. If you don't like your job, you can quit. And maybe someday you can be the capitalist. You're not a slave. As this says right here, you're a worker, notice the paper hat, standing above everything. You are free labor. Now, free labor does not mean they work for free. Free labor means they are free to make their own choices. You have your own life, your independence, liberty. You can pursue your happiness. You can go to whatever place you're going to be. Now, this has free labor kind of represent the South. I'll show you other ones from this magazine. There's an editorial magazine called Puck Magazine. So somebody knows it first period on top. It says the name of it. That's a P. Moving on. And they trusted it. And they said, no, it's fine. Okay, just 1 minute before we do your stuff. You're free. You're free to decide your own fate. This is not slavery. Free labor is not the same as slavery in the South. One of you, look around. One of you will write down that free labor are the same as slaves. Just like there are people who wrote down that the 3/5 compromise gives slaves 3/5 of a vote. Who will do it? Look around. I can guess right now. Free labor means you're free to make your own decisions. And their point is this. You have all these opportunities. So if you fail, if you don't get rich, if you don't own your own factory, if you don't like your life, it's your fault. You should have worked harder, you should have better parents. You should have been smarter. You should have taken the breaks when they came. You should have been luckier. It's your responsibility with all these opportunities. So if you're in a factory job that you hate, it's your fault. And what party would they come around? New party. What became the anti-Andrew Jackson party? The Whigs. They were Whigs in the Revolutionary War. They took the name from the British opposition party to the Tories. This is the anti-Jackson party. Now, actually, their name would have been more appropriately I Hate Andrew Jackson and Democracy Party. But that's too many words. They call themselves the Whigs. And they looked at it, we trust it. We trust it. Laissez-faire. Hands off of competition. Help big business. Hands off of competition. Laissez-faire. Now, who's correct? Those who believed in free labor or those who believed in wage slavery?
Would have been the wage slavery because the wages were dropped so low compared to what they were used to receiving.
Didn't matter where you were at then? If you were somebody who was a capitalist, isn't free labor great? Which one is more true looking back objectively? Both. Aren't there elements of both that are true? I mean, can't you see if you work hard, you have a chance, but at the same time the system can be rigged? There are elements of truth. And I know somebody might be, ooh, I think free labor is more, or you might think wage slavery. But there's elements of both that are true. I definitely lean more one way. But you can see the argument either way. That's really important when you start talking about this politically. Because why does this matter? Governments create the economy. They make the rules, they make the law, they value the currency. If you believe that the system is rigged and that people who agree with you become in charge politically, they will do things to change that imbalance of power. But if you believe the system is working great, trust it, to do things probably to continue this or make it more. This really matters. One more quick question. Which one is more conservative and which one would be more liberal in the 20th century? The Whigs are more conservative or liberal? Conservative. Whigs are more conservative. All right. So workers therefore felt really insecure, really scared. And this was an overriding failure. Because remember, economies of scale. Who has a competitive advantage in economies of scale? Big. Well, let's say you're an individual worker and these companies get bigger and bigger and bigger. They go from the small, where you might work for somebody, but you know them, you're paid a different way, to you're one of 1,000 workers. I'm one of 1,000 workers. How much power do you have? If you walk in and you grab your paper and say, I demand a raise. I demand a bathroom break. I demand the right to have a 20-minute lunch, not a 5-minute lunch. We got to do something to make this place safe, because we've had people arms ripped off, and I don't want that happening to me. You go and say that, you beat to the death. What's going to happen to you? Especially then. Good luck in your next job. You're gone. You're not getting paid for this week. Maybe one day of pay, but let's say all 1,000 come in together. Doesn't that change things? Workers realize right away, alone I have no power. Together. The problem is together, what if you're working with a bunch of Germans? You want to talk to them? Do you see how this can mess things up? Or men and women, color of skin, religion. We start dividing people up into little groups. They can't unify. And that's where unions will come in. Unions. And so, why the growth of unions? These are the big things that workers had a big problem with. So we talked about. So this is kind of review. Wage system. How do you get higher pay in a wage system? It's supply and demand, isn't it? I mean, maybe you can get a skill that's in demand, but that's hard to do. And if the company makes money, what happens to your wages? No direct effect. So how do you get higher pay? Next, working conditions. They're really unsafe. And to have safe working conditions is a cost. Companies are trying to cut costs all the time. There's a financial incentive for companies to have a dangerous workplace. Now, they might not want to do it, but that's business. That's one of those cheesy lines in the movies where they justify doing horrible things. Hey, got to make money. Well, we all got to make money and survive. And there's always job insecurity. There's no guarantee for a job. A few more things. One of the biggies that really hit is that machines are going to become more important than people. And we're just going to plug in the people into the machines, which is, you're kind of plugged into the capital. And this is creating a monopoly of power that workers don't feel they have. And lastly, do you have rights in the workplace? Can you say what you want? Can you be fired for what you say on the workplace? Can you be fired for what you say outside of the workplace? Not in Montana, but in most states you can today, even today. Montana has some of the strictest pro-worker laws in America. We used to be a lot more liberal state. We're now very conservative. They wanted to get rid of those laws, but they're hard to get rid of. So, remember all together that the collective bargaining I mentioned before. Now, companies tried to sue them, and the first place where their unions was Massachusetts. Remember the textiles. And in a court case in Massachusetts came out called Commonwealth versus Hunt. It's in the Massachusetts State Supreme Court, Massachusetts. But it said that they could form unions. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. What does Massachusetts have to do with every other state? It set the precedent that collectively bargaining by a union is not fraud. The problem is companies didn't have to listen. And it's still, we have very weak union laws to this day. So here are workers, and I love this one. These are garment workers. This is in Lowell. And American ladies will not be sexed. I should add something very important. I say this over and over again, but it has to be repeated. There are people to this day who say that they didn't know any better about slavery. Everyone did slaves and they didn't think it was wrong. They all knew slavery was wrong and horrible. They just wanted to make money. They would justify it another way. Everybody knew slavery was wrong. So, we're going to jump right to here. Write down socialism, one more thing about socialism, and that's it. And then, tomorrow, our scripture outlines, I'll talk about thesis one more time, I'll give you the essay questions. We are set. You got factors of the Industrial Revolution. You got political, social, religious changes. This is a real turning point, isn't it? Everything's going to be different. You notice how I just set up 3 different choices for essay questions. I'll give you them all. Factors, effects, turning point. Don't. I saw that. And the Roman Republic. That's the question you're getting. Oh, yeah. Oh, and you said the time of the trouble. Say it again. The biggest reason why they didn't are angry for Protestants. So they got rid of the and then Catholics, Irish Catholics, they look for Protestants. And then you get the slightly different religion and living in each other. Oh my God. No. A lot of poor Scots were Protestant. By the English, the Irish Catholics.
You're the best score I've heard so far.
So it's called Scotch Irish.
Okay. I didn't take it either. That makes me feel less bad.
And that's what the color.
I might have to get it.
Orange represents
Because
color.
it's a toy, and so I can treat it as best as I can. It's over here.
The sheet.
It's
Yes.
I don't like
Yeah, and so the Protestant, but the big thing the Protestant
they try to share, and you basically have to get it removed or treated the best. What do you get? Have you tried? Are the olives still around? Yes. I Oh, yeah. Oh, what?
That's your job.
Oh, yeah, my buddy, my pal. Anyways, we're gonna go hang out with the bath now.
Keep going. Yeah. Is that not what I say?
I love the artwork.
Yeah, it is pretty clever. Yeah.
I didn't think I was on.
Take your talk. Where are you gonna be?
It's
What?
high school forum for APUSH.
That's kind of sweet.
What did you give him? What did you give him?
I gave him. I gave him.
Thank you.
Let me know how much fun it is.
Okay, I will.
That's why we all get volunteers. Those people stop. You're in trouble.
You're getting closer and closer to those tests every single day. Closer and closer to those tests every single day. If you take notes on Friday,
Charlie asked him, did you take good notes?
I know, I definitely just copied Charlie saying that, but did you take notes at all on Friday? Because I'm not gonna watch them.
Oh yeah, that takes a while. I think kind of what color? Circle. I want bright color. All right, everybody. Tomorrow we have. I'm going to give you the questions. Hey, I don't like to brag, but have you seen the crane? Wait.
Oh my God.
You can look. Don't touch. Because as we all know, crayons are cool. I know one likes colored pencils, right? Nobody.
What happens if those get mixed? What will you do if they get stolen? Will you start a public riot? Will you hold public execution?
The rack will be used